I'm listening to this book right now by these two former Navy SEALs, and they tell the story of one of the many nightmares of war. It's called Blue on Blue, when people on the same side accidentally shoot at one another. Miraculously, only one person was hurt. He did survive. They figured it out before it went too far. But the part that got me was the debrief and how everyone in the room said it was their fault. They owned their part of the failure. They admitted to not triple checking, to not relaying a message clearly enough, to not keeping it from happening. Every single person said, it's me. And then, of course, the point of the story was the lead. He said, no, it was me. Today's podcast is about fostering engagement, creativity in our organizations. It's how we scale our success across industries, teams, organizations. This makes all the difference for our outcomes, business or otherwise. If we have this happening on our teams, we are making things happen. Today, we're talking about really owning it. Welcome to The Behaviorist with Work Wisdom, where we help you adopt high-performance mindsets, behaviors, communication, and culture. I'm your host, Sarah Colantonio. Our intention for the Behaviorist podcast is to share accessible, concrete practices you can weave into your whole life to begin a shift towards joy and meaningful achievement. Today, we're turning our focus on owning it. And I'm grateful to have Nate Shea back again, the founder and CEO of SecureStrux, joining me. Thank you for coming.
Great to be here.
So today on the show, we want to explore this concept of owning it. And I don't mean employee ownership, although that's an interesting topic. We could talk about that another day. But I'm talking about owning it in three main ways. One, we take responsibility for what we've done. Two, we're accountable for our actions and our decisions. And third, we take pride in what we do and what we've got to offer. So I would like to ask you what it means to have your team own it. What does it look like at your company?
Yeah. Before I answer that, it's an interesting story about owning it. Those two SEALs of the Blue team. I also saw a video not too long ago with the Blue Angels and how they always have a debrief afterwards, and they go through that whole scenario and the whole flight and talk about where they made the mistakes and own it. And so that's pretty cool. But, at SecureStrux, employees taking ownership in their jobs means, for us at least, that they exhibit a sense of responsibility for outcomes, a commitment, and accountability towards their work. They go beyond just completing tasks. They take initiative, they solve problems, and they're actively contributing to our organization and our goals. They treat their work like it's their business. They're striving for excellence, and they're taking pride in their accomplishments. We're certainly not perfect, and there's certainly folks that lead and take ownership at different levels. And there's different levels to ownership, and we'll probably talk about that a little later. But so that's what ideally it would look like. Taking accountability, holding one another accountable, being willing to be held accountable is a big part of it. Incidentally, we do have one of our core values, which is
Really?
Yeah. So it's the freedom to own it is one of our core values. And that core value was not something like typically when you go through core values, you're kind of looking at the people around you, what like people in your company are blown out of the park and who you'd like to replicate, or you're looking down at the bottom of your feet and you're saying, who are we? And then you're trying to articulate it. Yeah. Well, with the freedom to own it, we weren't doing a good job. Okay. And so we wanted to, it was an aspirational core value that we wanted to kind of graft into our company and, make that a core value.
I love that.
And so over time, it probably started 3 or 4 years ago, but a lot of our folks, they all work on their own islands, that we're remote for the most part. We have a core team in the office to do the back office work, but most of our folks that are delivering out in the field are either working for the client directly or on their own island. And so really need to extend a lot of trust to them that they're doing their work, that things are being accomplished. So that's a little bit ideally what it would look like at SecureStrux, to own it in their work.
I love that idea of finding it as a aspirational value and being like, let's do this.
Yeah.
Because the impact of it is incredible. There's this study, I think I sent you the article, Zenger and Folkman, and they looked at cultures where the people in the organization really own it. And it's amazing. The productivity, the engagement is off the charts. It is really noticeable. And they even talk about the fact that the bonus is you get to work with people that are really hardworking and into what they do.
And making you better.
Yes, exactly.
You're not carrying their water.
Yep.
And you get to work beside people that are challenging you and, making you better.
Yeah.
And I think that starts with setting clear expectations. There's different, time horizons for folks. Some people have been there in their career a little bit longer. You can say, hey, we need to take that mountain. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we need to take that mountain. Please just figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
And they can do it.
Yeah.
But typically those people have been there, done that. And then there's, people that are newer in their career where you've got to really set, like, this is what needs to be done every day. Here's what good looks like. And these are the goals we're trying to get to. And typically they're around 90-day type of goals.
Okay.
That's the time horizon. Once you get, to a year or 3 years, 5 years out, it's kind of like, I don't know what that looks like. So setting clear expectations is really important, giving folks the autonomy to do their work, which it means extending trust, not micromanaging, which is a temptation. Whenever it's your
balance.
when it's your company and you've started it, you want to curate every decision.
Sure.
And but that can be problematic because they just want to do their job and they don't need somebody. They don't want to feel the breath on their neck. So for us too, encourage problem solving and being innovative is really important to us. And the only way you're going to be innovative is if you fail.
Yeah.
It's not a one-way street. Yeah. So, it's not a one-way street on that. And so you need to give them the opportunity to fail and obviously encourage them and give them the resources to succeed, but to not be slapping their hand every time they fail.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing about cultures where people own it. It's not from saying you need to own this and then they do it and then you're like, nope, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
It just completely erodes. I'm really curious when it comes to this idea of having your people own it. It is how we scale. It's how we have success. So I'm curious how it's helped you be successful to adopt this value and have your team really living into it.
Well, for me, it allows me to focus on the things that I'm really good at, rather than like doing payroll or all the things that you do when you first start a company up, or the hiring, or just the day-to-day work that it takes to run a company. It frees me up to be more strategic. The byproduct of it is that it gives me purpose is to grow these folks into leaders, and so that they can own it. And then I can sit back and watch and be like, encourage them, maybe a cheerleader for them. But it allows, and that's really fulfilling. And I think it is for most, owners or leaders in a company that can, bring those people up and allow them to make those to own the decisions.
Yeah.
So, and that takes, or it requires us to be, to lead by example, and be willing to get our hands dirty and be down in the trenches with them, they're not going to own it if we're not owning it and taking responsibility and being vulnerable and being like, you know what, I messed up.
Yeah.
So I think that encourages them. But hiring capable people that can do that takes time and sometimes some vetting. Some iterations. Some iterations. Yeah, that's the good word. It's some iterations there. So, but their success is my success, and other ways to test this, I think, and I've done this in the past, is to give them little things to try out, and if they are successful there, continue to build upon that, let it compound, getting away from the company for a little bit and see what breaks. You don't want to go away for a whole year or 3 months, but you might want to start with a week or two and just get away and see what breaks, and whenever it breaks, you tweak it and fix it, and so.
That is so scary, but that makes so much sense to do that.
Yeah. So, like you said, it's an iteration.
Yeah.
And, so again, having capable people that you're not having to carry their water, that you trust, that you respect, makes a world of difference, and it allows us to kind of let go of the vine and we say elevate or delegate and elevate. Say delegated and down, and then so you can be elevated to do other things. The things that probably take a little bit more. As an owner or leader, you have a different perspective than those that are on the ground. So you see the bigger picture, and so that allows you to work on some of those more strategic things.
Yeah.
So.
I appreciate that so much. I think that this idea of owning it for our team, it really is, we have to set the tone.
Yeah.
We are creating the environment that motivates people to want to own it.
Yeah.
And in the same book that I'm obsessed with now by the SEALs, they talk about the fact that there are no bad teams, just bad leaders.
Yeah.
And there's this incredible story of the team. They had that Budge training, and they were having to race with the heavy rubber boat, and the one team was consistently getting first or second place, and this other team was consistently in last place.
Yeah.
And then the instructors pulled a fast one, and they switched the leaders, and the team that kept losing started to win.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God. Okay. So it's on us.
Absolutely. You see that in sports a lot, where the owner of the company or the general manager be like, you know what, I need new leadership in the locker room. I need a new coach in the locker room. And when that switch happens, they're getting more juice out of that orange. And I've heard something here recently too about, if someone is not performing well, asking yourself, taking that ownership and saying, what am I doing wrong or what can I be doing different so that you can perform better and be better.
Yeah.
So taking that ownership, like what's wrong with you? And not asking that question, asking, is there something I could be doing to help you perform better?
Yeah.
And taking that ownership.
It starts with us. So what's the secret sauce? How do you foster ownership? What seems to help the team get there?
Again, I think there's several ingredients in that sauce. One being an example, leading by example. I think that's first, giving them the freedom to fail and getting out of their way. And then whenever they do have ideas and we bring to the table, even if they're like, I don't think that's a great idea, not smacking their hands, but considering it, maybe even going with it, even though you think, well, this is probably not the brightest or best idea. Sometimes, you'll be surprised. But if you're constantly slapping that away or slapping their hands when they bring ideas, they're not going to own it. They're just going to say, what's next? What box do I need to check next?
Yeah.
And creating an environment where you can be collaborative, whether it's if you're all remote in your own teams or you're hybrid, having times where people can come together and they can contribute. Because when they contribute, they then take ownership and have agency to be a part of the success. Yeah. And if it fails, which it does. Probably more often than not, it fails. But they're in on it.
Yeah.
They get to be a part of that. And using we a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not I. And so that's, I don't know, like I'm sure there's lots of different flavors in tomato sauce, different ways to bake it, but those are some of the ingredients, I think. It is a mindset too with your folks, and they don't always come in with that mindset. They look at their job description and they just want to do what's on that job description. And the higher up you go, usually in an organization, that job description gets smaller, and there's just like, hey, drive this company to X revenue. I don't know how to do it, but that's why I brought you in to do it. So I really need you to take ownership of that.
Yeah.
So I think those are some of the ingredients of obviously leading first, leading by example, and then getting out of their way.
Yeah.
Because that's what you brought them to do, was that role that you probably are not as good at as they are.
Yeah.
So.
It sounds to me too, part of the secret sauce is the idea of getting out of their way is getting rid of our own egos too.
Yeah.
And having humility.
Yeah, and not, being puppeteer and trying to orchestrate the outcome. Because many times you may not have done it the same way, but it's still getting done. And it maybe looks a little different than the way you would do it. But again, you're not going to be successful. You don't scale when you're trying to get in everyone else's business. And that's trust extended. And trust is earned over time. But you got to start with it, I believe. And then give them the opportunities to fail as well, so they learn. And if they are taking ownership, we've had this too. I love it whenever I hear somebody come into my office and say, you know what, I'm sorry, that didn't work out. That was my fault. And they take ownership of it, and this is what I would do different. And they pivot. Yeah. That's when you have somebody's taking ownership. Yeah.
That is exactly the script. That's amazing.
So.
Wow. I wanted to speak to this notion of trust that you mentioned. And we know that with trust, there are three main drivers. And one is authenticity. So if we trust that we're experiencing the real you,
that's right,
the real person, we trust them. And the second is judgment. And so if you trust my reasoning and my logic, then we have trust. And the third is empathy, interestingly enough. So if you believe I have your best interests at heart, we have trust. And if there isn't trust, there's a wobble there. And it's usually one of those three. Yeah. And we all kind of struggle. Yeah. But in one way or the other. But a lot of times when, as leaders, we think about how we don't trust the other person. Like we might say, I don't trust their judgment, and that helps with the conversation, but it also gives us insight into where might they have a wobble with me. Yeah. Is it?
I like that word, wobble.
Yeah. Because you can tighten up a wobble. You can
and there's different levels of trust, too. Like, there's I could put the $20 bill here on the table, walk away, and trust that person is not going to take the $20 bill. That's a different kind of trust than that person has told me they were going to deliver this, initiative or product in 90 days. And when we get to 90 days, will it be accomplished, or will they make excuses, or will they point fingers? So it's just different levels of trust. And I think that's where it starts to wobble, is if like you get to like week 11 and they're like, yeah, I'm still on track. I'm working. This is going to get done. And then you get to week 12 and it's like, where's the disconnect here? So,
It's a perfect sort of, to me, it's a perfect way to have the conversation. Because if I say I don't trust you, we're going to have a fight.
Yeah.
But if I can talk about, we have a wobble here, then I think we can get to some working through adjusting it.
And I think there's to try to minimize that wobble. It's just having some open lines of communication, and for us at least, we do our very best to have quarterly conversations, at least on a quarterly basis. Okay. We have just some questions that help set the stage for a more. It's really a conversation, but to set the stage for if there is a problem or a wobble, we can address it in that. Obviously, if there's 90 days is better than a year to figure out if something's not working right. But just having that open door and that trust, I mean, it will build trust the more easily and more often that you're communicating.
So that's part of the tomato sauce, the secret sauce.
Yeah.
There's one other one I want to talk to you about.
Okay.
And when we do trainings on this, we talk about enthusiasm. And I don't know what you think about that, but I think you do this really well. Yeah. In the Zenger and Folkman research, they found that organizations that had positive environments, positive cultures, there was more engagement. Owning it. Yeah. Totally. Way more. People were more willing to go the extra mile. Yep. They were more into their work.
Well, I know for me, I'd prefer to go to a wedding over a funeral every day.
Right. Exactly. Yes. And so part of that was, again, it comes down to the leader who sets the tone. And a piece of that had to do with being open to new ideas, but also like recognition, true like reward and recognition. Absolutely. That just adds to this positive culture. So, okay, so you agree. This is a big ingredient.
Like recognizing when someone takes ownership when they failed is really important. Yeah. And to be that encourager in both in word one-on-one, but also to the group maybe. Yeah. And like, I really appreciate John over here, you know, taking ownership. It didn't work out the way we all thought it was going to work out, but he took ownership and he changed course. So I think that's really important. And then with someone, obviously, when they accomplish, when they have an accomplishment for the work that they've done, obviously you're giving them recognition. I mean, all of that stuff goes, especially if it's sincere. Everyone knows if we've got, fake praise. Yeah. But like those, like just coming up beside somebody's like, I really appreciate it, what you just did, or that recognition and rewards. I prefer to use the carrot over the stick any day. Yeah.
Yeah. So. Yeah. What's the saying? What's rewarded is repeated.
That's right. And so people they're watching us, and they're watching, what you're encouraging and what you're talking about. And so if you can just find those ways and try to be mindful of the little ones, even a lot of the little things. It's not these big annual ceremonies. It's the hallway conversation. It's those little 5-person meetings where you recognize somebody for what they've done and even how they've maybe failed but took ownership. So, or I think in the same article I read about the manager of a restaurant, there was a mess on the floor and everybody just walked around it for like 10 minutes and nobody cleaned it up. Yeah. But recognizing somebody, like they had something on the floor, piece of paper or whatever, and they picked it up, like they treated it like it was theirs. Yeah. Like they took ownership. Yeah. Like I said earlier, there's different levels of ownership. Yeah. And it's really, I don't expect anyone to act like the owner. Like I think that's foolish to think that people, you're going to hire a team that's going to come in and act like the owner. It's not their baby. But if you can get 70-80% of your team to have that mindset of an owner, like even if it's just 70% of ownership, that's good. That's fine. Yeah. Like like I said, there's different levels. There's a book out there called Radical Candor.
I love it.
You've read it?
Yeah,
okay.
Oh yeah.
By Kim Scott, and she talks about rock star versus the superstar.
Yeah.
And just we're all in different phases of our career, and like we have seasons. And sometimes you're on a trajectory that you're blown out of the water. You're the superstar, and you're coming in, and just for a period of time, watch out.
Yeah.
And then you got the rock star, steady Eddie, coming in, doing their job.
Yep.
Not making waves, not making a big splash, but your company would sink without them.
Yeah.
And just that steadiness, that you might get from somebody just like, I just want to do this. I want to clock out at 5, but I'm going to take ownership of that role while I'm at work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
That's really a great segue, because I was going to ask about how do you work with people on the team who just won't own it. They want to come in, they want to do the job and leave.
Yeah.
How do you think that impacts the culture of high performance?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's different levels in this ownership. There's people that are, like I just said, they're doing their job, they're checking the boxes, and you might have like your administrative assistant or someone that's just been doing the job for a long time, but you'd fail without them.
Yeah.
And they're necessary to have in the company. But then there's people that aren't owning their role. You've been clear with them on this is what is required and what we need to have done, and either they're not stepping up to do that role, or they're blaming others if there's failure, or there's timelines. And that's where asking the question, is there something I could be doing better to help you in this role, or and asking those questions first, a little bit of coaching potentially. At some point, though, that can rot the organization if you have people like that. And we have had, I think every company has had some folks in their company where they weren't owning it, and then it starts to, it can negatively affect the rest of the team. No one wants to carry someone else's water. No, at least not for, not for a long period of time. Obviously, you want to pitch in and help, but if they have to constantly be coming behind somebody and micromanaging them because they're not taking ownership in their role, then it's time to graduate them out of the company and put them in give them the opportunity to be in a somewhere where they will be able to use their gifts and be a rock star. So hate to see that happen, but it happens. So
okay. Well, I think since the benefits of having a team that is empowered and wants to own it and acts that way and lives that way is so important. It's fun to work with people like that.
Yeah.
and then it's great for the organization overall. I think that people, at least the leaders that I encounter, they seem to definitely want this. And so the final question is about what advice? What advice for leaders who want to empower their people, but maybe they're struggling with letting go of control? Yeah.
And I think a lot of leaders will struggle with this, and hopefully they'll get better and learn as the years go on. But I think what we've talked about, there's a lot of weaving in what we've already said, but setting clear expectations is really helpful, because then the team knows what the goal line looks like. Having a vision and a clear vision for where we're going, so that people know the direction they're going and what they're trying to accomplish. If that's not clear, then they're not sure. Sometimes they aren't getting purpose in their work, and then sometimes you've got a bunch of people going in different directions, and there's not everybody rowing at the same pace. So the expectations I think are very important if you want to get out of the day-to-day and you want to be more strategic or just have the freedom. A lot of, I think most folks want to have more time to at least decide what they would like to do. I said earlier too, like getting away for a little bit and letting people make those mistakes while you're out of the office, or see if anything breaks, and then fixing it, and then being able to do that a little bit longer. Like, I don't suggest getting away for 3 months right out of the gate, but and then giving people the freedom again to fail, and to correct their mistakes. Because if you're in our field, we're in cybersecurity and technology. If you want to innovate and iterate quickly, you're going to fail. Yeah, you've got to, or else, it's just not a one-directional process. So that'd be another thing, is just encourage failure and recovery, and I guess what we talked about earlier too is it's not going to be exactly the way you planned. Let them figure it out, and it's going to look a little different. Your portrait of your painting is going to be a little different than theirs. And but in the end, if the job has gotten done, clients are happy, employees are rallying around one another, you can't complain. So, and then I think being willing to be held accountable is really important as well. And you get yourself out of there quickly, because people around you will see that you've got flaws, you got problems, and you're willing to correct. And I think that'll allow them to do the same, and to take some ownership in the company. Maybe not actual equity, but like you said, it's a different topic.
Yeah, different topic. But I that's true. I this week I had to eat some humble pie, as they say. And, but there was a lot of freedom after doing that, and the conversation that followed. I think everybody was like, "Oh, good, she can admit when she screws up." So,
and it allows them to do that. Allows them to breathe a little bit. And hopefully they're not as uptight, and they can move a little bit quicker. And I guess just last would be show up consistently, and be consistent as you show up. Nothing worse than like coming into work and not knowing like what your boss or the people around you, with the mood they're going to be in. So trying to show up consistently, or consistent with consistence. So so that's a few little pieces of advice. So what book are you referencing here with
Extreme Ownership?
Extreme
Ownership. I'm listening to it. I love their like seals
with Jocko and
Liv. They're awesome. They don't know what big fan I am, but
that's great. You can tag them.
That's a great idea. I will tag them. One of my favorite parts of it is keep it simple. Simplicity is a work wisdom value, and I can make things complicated. And I think that can get in the way of people owning it, if they're like you were talking about, like if they don't know what's going on or why we're here or what's the goal, what am I supposed to be doing?
Let them complicate it as they go. But you like learning anything new. Like if you're starting simple, then it's like, okay, now it became second nature. I can now expand on that. I love Jocko, and I think he says something like discipline equals freedom. Is one of his things, and like there's a lot of freedom from being disciplined in your routines. I love that. So that's good. That's my Bible right now. All right. I'm so grateful for you, Nate, being part of this movement to help others enhance their individual and collective team performance in the workplace. Thank you for listening to and downloading the Behaviorist podcast. We hope you'll subscribe. Please contact us through our website, workwisdomllc.com, where you can enjoy Work Wisdom Press and productions, ask questions, and please suggest topics you'd like us to explore in future episodes. Our custom is to leave you with a quote, so I got Jocko's quote here. It's just so good. It's not what you preach. It's what you tolerate. You have to drive your leaders to exercise extreme ownership, to acknowledge mistakes,
stop blaming others, and lead their team to success. If you allow the status quo to persist, you can't expect to improve performance, and you can't expect to win.